everyone, and welcome to Storytime with Tamarin.
And Ted, do you like my fancy headband? Yes, we both have decided to step it up a notch today in light of what's been happening, to do something little that brings us joy.
Yeah, that's right. In times like this, sometimes little things can lighten our mood a little bit and bring a bit more joy to ourselves and therefore to others. And so here we are.
So, yes, I've got this lovely headband on,
and I'm back in the purple wig and with some gold glitter on as well, because it just makes me happy having this on. And Ted, you look absolutely fabulous.
Yes, thank you very much.
So here we are. Just pop you on your pillow there, Ted. What can I say before I start story time? I really hope that you're all doing okay. I am, such a bundle of thoughts and emotions at the moment. I wasn't going to do story time until later because I'm waiting, on a personal note, I'm waiting on Rishi to say whatever he's going to say. But also, obviously, we've got the situation, the ongoing corona situation, and we've got, I've been aware in the news of what's been going on in America with, the death of that man. So, there's a lot. And I just want to reach out before I read The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe to, just send you like big hugs and stuff, because it's a lot. And I hope that this tragic death sparks some change for the better. So that's what I'm hoping for and what I'm trying to focus on. But obviously, it's very difficult, and difficult to know what to say as well. You know, I don't want to say the wrong thing. Not that I think I would say the wrong thing. I've seen some very moving videos that have been made by people, white people, black people. Saying words of support and words of truth and their truth, and I've just been sharing that because I think they put it into words much better than I do. But I'm certainly, feeling a lot at the moment. I've been a bit teary today, and I think that that's a good thing. It means that I care, and I hope that if you're feeling a bit upset or just don't know what to do, and maybe there isn't a lot we can do right now, I don't know. Just reaching across now to say, I'm with you on that. And, we just hope for the best, hope for change, and whatever we can do, we'll do. So, I hope that's okay. And I'll get on with reading now. Now, I've decided, because I looked a little bit ahead on the book, that I'm going to do 2 chapters today. I'm going to do chapter 14 and chapter 15, because chapter 14, I didn't want to end on chapter 14. So we're going to do 2 chapters, and then on, I don't know when, maybe Tuesday, but I'll finish the book with the final 2 chapters in my next reading. Okay, so I hope you're sitting comfortably. And this is chapter 14 of The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. And it's called The Triumph of the Witch. As soon as the witch had gone, Aslan said, "We must move from this place at once. It will be wanted for other purposes. We shall encamp tonight at the fords of Baruna." Of course, everyone was dying to ask him how he had arranged matters with the witch, but his face was stern, and everyone's ears were still ringing with the sound of his roar, and so nobody dared. After a meal, which was taken in the open air on the hilltop, for the sun had got strong by now and dried the grass, they were busy for a while, taking the pavilion down and packing things up. Before 2 o'clock, they were on the march and set off in a northeasterly direction, walking at an easy pace, for they had not far to go. During the first part of the journey, Aslan explained to Peter his plan of campaign.
as soon as she has finished her business in these parts," he said, "the witch and her crew will almost certainly fall back to her house and prepare for a siege. You may or may not be able to cut her off and prevent her from reaching it."
He then went on to outline 2 plans of battle, one for fighting the witch and her people in the wood, and another for assaulting her castle. And all the time he was advising Peter how to conduct the operations, saying things like, "You must put your centaurs in such and such a place," or "You must post scouts to see that she doesn't do so and so," till at last Peter said, "But you will be there yourself, Aslan." "I can give no promise of that," answered the lion, and he continued giving Peter his instructions. For the last part of the journey, it was Susan and Lucy who saw most of him. He did not talk very much, and seemed to them to be sad. It was still afternoon when they came down to a place where the river valley had widened out, and the river was broad and shallow. This was the fords of Baruna, and Aslan gave orders to halt on this side of the water. But Peter said, "Wouldn't it be better to camp on the far side, for fear she might try a night attack or anything?" Aslan, who seemed to have been thinking about something else, roused himself with a shake of his magnificent mane and said, What's that?" Peter said it all over again. "No," said Aslan in a dull voice, as if it didn't matter. "No, she will not make an attack tonight." And then he sighed deeply, but presently he added, "All the same, it was well thought of. That is how a soldier ought to think. But it doesn't really matter." So they proceeded to pitch their camp. Aslan's mood affected everyone that evening. Peter was feeling uncomfortable too at the idea of fighting the battle on his own. The news that Aslan might not be there had come as a great shock to him. Supper that evening was a quiet meal. Everyone felt how different it had been last night, or even that morning. It was as if the good times, having just begun, were already drawing to their end. This feeling affected Susan so much that she couldn't get to sleep when she went to bed. And after she had lain counting sheep and turning over and over, she heard Lucy give a long sigh and turn over just beside her in the darkness. "Can't you get to sleep either?" said Susan. "No," said Lucy. "I thought you were asleep. I say, Susan." "What?" "I've a most terrible feeling, as if something were hanging over us." "Have you? Because, as a matter of fact, so have I." "Something about Aslan," said Lucy. "Either something dreadful is going to happen to him, or something dreadful that he's going to do." "There's been something wrong with him all afternoon," said Susan. "Lucy, what was that he said about not being with us at the battle? You don't think he could be stealing away and leaving us tonight, do you?" "Where is he now?" said Lucy. "Is he here in the pavilion?" "I don't think so." "Susan, let's go outside and have a look. We might see him." "All right, let's," said Susan. "We might just as well be doing something as we're lying awake here." Very quietly, the 2 girls groped their way among the other sleepers and crept out of the tent. The moonlight was bright, and everything was quite still, except for the noise of the river chattering over the stones. Then Susan suddenly caught Lucy's arm and said, "Look!" On the far side of the camping ground, just where the trees began, they saw the lion slowly walking away from them into the wood. Without a word, they both followed him. He led them up the steep slope out of the river valley and then slightly to the right, apparently by the very same route which they had used that afternoon in coming from the hill of the stone table. On and on he led them, into dark shadows and out into pale moonlight, getting their feet wet with the heavy dew. He looked somehow different from the Aslan they knew. His tail and his head hung low, and he walked slowly as if he were very, very tired. Then, when they were crossing a wide open place where there were no shadows for them to hide in, he stopped and looked round. It was no good trying to run away, so they came towards him. When they were closer, he said, "Oh, children, children, why are you following me?" "We couldn't sleep," said Lucy, and then felt sure that she need say no more, and that Aslan knew all they had been thinking. "Please, may we come with you, wherever you're going?" asked Susan. "Well," said Aslan, and seemed to be thinking. Then he said,
I shall be glad of company tonight. Yes, you may come, if you will promise to stop when I tell you, and after that leave me to go on alone."
"Oh, thank you, and we will," said the two girls. Forward they went again, and one of the girls walked on each side of the lion. But how slowly he walked, and his great royal head drooped so that his nose nearly touched the grass. Presently he stumbled and gave a low moan. "Aslan, dear Aslan," said Lucy, "what is wrong? Can't you tell us?" "Are you ill, dear Aslan?" asked Susan.
"No," said Aslan. "I am sad and lonely. Lay your hands on my mane so that I can feel you are there, and let us walk like that."
And so the girls did what they would never have dared to do without his permission, but what they had longed to do ever since they had first saw him, buried their cold hands in the beautiful sea of fur and stroked it, and, so doing, walked with him. And presently they saw that they were going with him up the slope of the hill on which the stone table stood. They went up at the side where the trees came furthest up, and when they got to the last tree, it was one that had some bushes about it, Aslan stopped and said,
"Oh, children, children, here you must stop, and whatever happens, do not let yourselves be seen. Farewell."
And both the girls cried bitterly, though they hardly knew why, and clung to the lion, and kissed his mane and his nose and his paws and his great sad eyes. Then he turned from them and walked out onto the top of the hill, and Lucy and Susan, crouching in the bushes, looked after him, and this is what they saw. Hi Lee, hi Stephen. I've lost my page, sorry. Yes, this is what they saw. A great crowd of people were standing all round the stone table, and though the moon was shining, many of them carried torches which burned with evil-looking red flames and black smoke. But such people, ogres with monstrous teeth, and wolves and bull-headed men, spirits of evil trees and poisonous plants, and other creatures whom I won't describe, because if I did, the grown-ups would probably not let you read this book. Cruels and hags and incubuses, wraiths, horrors, ifrits, sprites, orkneys, wusses and ettins. In fact, here were all those who were on the witch's side, and whom the wolf had summoned at her command. And right in the middle, standing by the table, was the witch herself. A howl and a gibber of dismay went up from the creatures when they first saw the great lion pacing towards them, and for a moment even the witch seemed to be struck with fear. Then she recovered herself and gave a wild, fierce laugh. "The fool!" she cried. "The fool has come! Bind him fast!" Lucy and Susan held their breaths, waiting for Aslan's roar and his spring upon his enemies, but it never came. 4 hags, grinning and leering, yet also at first hanging back and half afraid of what they had to do, had approached him. "Bind him, I say," repeated the White Witch. The hags made a dart at him and shrieked with triumph when they found that he made no resistance at all. Then others, evil dwarves and apes, rushed in to help him, and between them they rolled the huge lion over on his back and tied all his 4 paws together, shouting and cheering as if they had done something brave, though, had the lion chosen, one of those paws could have been the death of them all. But he made no noise, even when the enemies, straining and tugging, pulled the cords so tight that they cut into his flesh. Then they began to drag him towards the stone table. "Stop," said the witch. "Let him first be shaved." Another roar of mean laughter went up from her followers as an ogre with a pair of shears came forward and squatted down by Aslan's head. Snip, snip, snip went the shears, and masses of curling gold began to fall to the ground. Then the ogre stood back, and the children, watching from their hiding place, could see the face of Aslan looking all small and different without its mane. The enemies also saw the difference. "Why, he's only a great cat after all," cried one. "Is that what we were afraid of?" said another. and they surged round Aslan, jeering at him, saying things like, "Puss, puss, poor pussy," and "How many mice have you caught today, cat?" and "Would you like a saucer of milk, Possums?" "Oh, how can they?" said Lucy, tears streaming down her cheeks. "The brutes, the brutes!" For now that the first shock was over, the shorn face of Aslan looked to her braver and more beautiful and more patient than ever. Oh dear, look. Hi, Nat. There's the witch and all her awful creatures doing her bidding. And can you see there? There's Aslan, lying on his back. He's been tied up, and they're going to shave him there. Oh, it's terrible. Poor Aslan. "Muzzle him," said the witch. And even now, as they worked about his face, putting on the muzzle, one bite from his jaws would have cost 2 or 3 of them their hands. But he never moved, and this seemed to enrage all that rabble. Everyone was at him now. Those who had been afraid to come near him even after he was bound began to find their courage, and for a few minutes the 2 girls could not even see him, so thickly was he surrounded by the whole crowd of creatures, kicking him, hitting him, spitting on him, jeering at him. At last the rabble had had enough of this. They began to drag the bound and muzzled lion to the stone table, some pulling and some pushing. He was so huge that even when they got him there, it took all their efforts to hoist him onto the surface of it. Then there was more tying and tightening of cords. "The cowards, the cowards," sobbed Susan. "Are they still afraid of him, even now?" When once Aslan had been tied, and tied so that he was really a mass of cords, on the flat stone, a hush fell on the crowd. 4 hags, holding 4 torches, stood at the corners of the stone table. The witch bared her arms as she had bared them the previous night, when it had been Edmund instead of Aslan. Then she began to whet her knife. It looked to the children, when the gleam of the torchlight fell on it, as if the knife were made of stone, not of steel, and it was of a strange and evil shape. At last she drew near. She stood by Aslan's head. Her face was working and twitching with passion, but his looked up at the sky, still quiet, neither angry nor afraid, but a little sad. Then, just before she gave the blow, she stooped down and said in a quivering voice, "And now, who has won? Fool, did you think that by all this you would save the human traitor? Now I will kill you instead of him, as our pact was, and so the deep magic will be appeased. But when you are dead, what will prevent me from killing him as well? And who will take him out of my hand then? Understand that you have given me Narnia forever. You have lost your own life, and you have not saved his. In that knowledge, despair and die." The children did not see the actual moment of the killing. They couldn't bear to look and had covered their eyes. So, that's the end of chapter 14. But we're going to go on to chapter 15 because it gets better. Hi, Ben. Hi, Mark. Okay, so chapter 15, deeper magic from before the dawn of time. While the 2 girls still crouched in the bushes with their hands over their faces, they heard the voice of the witch calling out, "Now, follow me all, and we will set about what remains of this war. It will not take us long to crush the human vermin and the traitors now that the great fool, the great cat, lies dead." At this very moment the children were for a few seconds in very great danger, for with wild cries and a noise of skirling pipes and shrill horns blowing, the whole of that vile rabble came sweeping off the hilltop and down the slope right past their hiding place. They felt the spectres go by them like a cold wind, and they felt the ground shake beneath them under the galloping feet of the minotaurs, and overhead there went a flurry of foul wings and a blackness of vultures and giant bats. At any other time they would have trembled with fear, but now the sadness and shame and horror of Aslan's death so filled their minds that they hardly thought of it. As soon as the wood was silent again, Susan and Lucy crept out onto the open hilltop. The moon was getting low and thin clouds were passing across her, but still they could see the shape of the lion lying dead in his bonds. And down they both knelt in the wet grass and kissed his cold face and stroked his beautiful fur, what was left of it, and cried till they could cry no more. And then they looked at each other and held each other's hands for mere loneliness and cried again, and then again were silent. At last Lucy said, "I can't bear to look at that horrible muzzle. I wonder could we take it off?" So they tried. And after a lot of working at it, for their fingers were cold and it was now the darkest part of the night, they succeeded. And when they saw his face without it, they burst out crying again and kissed it and fondled it and wiped away the blood and the foam as well as they could. And it was all more lonely and hopeless and horrid than I know how to describe. "I wonder could we untie him as well," said Susan presently. But the enemies, out of pure spitefulness, had drawn the cords so tight that the girls could make nothing of the knots. I hope no one who reads this book has been quite as miserable as Susan and Lucy were that night, but if you have been, if you've been up all night and cried till you have no more tears left in you, you will know that there comes in the end a sort of quietness. You feel as if nothing was ever going to happen again. At any rate, that was how it felt to these two. Hours and hours seemed to go by in this dead calm, and they hardly noticed that they were getting colder and colder. But at last, Lucy noticed two other things. One was that the sky on the east side of the hill was a little less dark than it had been an hour ago. The other was some tiny movement going on in the grass at her feet. At first, she took no notice in this. What did it matter? Nothing mattered now. But at last she saw that whatever it was had begun to move up the upright stones of the stone table, and now, whatever they were moving about on Aslan's body. She peered closer. They were little grey things. "Ugh," said Susan from the other side of the table. "How beastly! There are horrid little mice crawling over him. Go away, you little beasts!" And she raised her hand to frighten them away. "Wait," said Lucy, who had been looking at them more closely still. "Can you see what they're doing?" Both girls bent down and stared. "I do believe," said Susan. "But how queer! They're nibbling away at the cords." "That's what I thought," said Lucy. "I think they're friendly mice, poor little things. They don't realise he's dead. They think it'll do some good untying him." It was quite definitely lighter by now. Each of the girls noticed for the first time the white face of the other. They could see the mice nibbling away, dozens and dozens, even hundreds of little field mice. And at last, one by one, the ropes were all gnawed through. The sky in the east was whitish by now, and the stars were getting fainter, all except one very big one low down on the eastern horizon. They felt colder than they had been all night. The mice crept away again. The girls cleared away the remains of the gnawed ropes. Aslan looked more like himself without them. Every moment his dead face looked nobler as the light grew and they could see it better. In the wood behind them a bird gave a chuckling sound. It had been so still for hours and hours that it startled them. Then another bird answered it. Soon there were birds singing all over the place. It was quite definitely early morning now, not late night. "I'm so cold," said Lucy. "So am I," said Susan. "Let's walk about a bit." They walked to the eastern edge of the hill and looked down. The one big star had almost disappeared. The country all looked dark grey, but beyond, at the very end of the world, the sea showed pale. The sky began to turn red. They walked to and fro more times than they could count between the dead Aslan and the eastern ridge, trying to keep warm, and oh, how tired their legs felt. Then at last, as they stood for a moment looking out towards the sea in Cair Paravel, which they could now just make out, the red turned to gold along the line where the sea and the sky met, and very slowly up came the edge of the sun. At that moment they heard from behind them a loud noise, a great cracking, deafening noise, as if a giant had broken a giant's plate. "What's that?" said Lucy, clutching Susan's arm. I feel afraid to turn round," said Susan. "Something awful is happening." "They're doing something worse to him," said Lucy. "Come on." And she turned, pulling Susan round with her. The rising of the sun had made everything look so different, all colours and shadows were changed, that for a moment they didn't see the important thing. Then they did. The stone table was broken into 2 pieces by a great crack that ran down it from end to end, and there was no Aslan. "Oh, oh!" cried the 2 girls, rushing back to the table. "Oh, it's too bad," sobbed Lucy. "They might have left the body alone." "Who's done it?" cried Susan. "What does it mean? Is it magic?" "Yes," said a great voice behind their backs. "It is more magic." They looked round. There, shining in the sunrise, larger than they had seen him before, shaking his mane, for it had apparently grown again, stood Aslan himself. "Oh, Aslan!" cried both the children, staring up at him, almost as much frightened as they were glad. "Aren't you dead then, dear Aslan?" said Lucy. "Not now," said Aslan. "You're not a—" asked Susan in a shaky voice. She couldn't bring herself to say the word ghost. Aslan stooped his golden head and licked her forehead. The warmth of his breath and a rich sort of smell that seemed to hang about his hair came all over her. "Do I look it?" he said. "Oh, you're real, you're real! Oh, Aslan!" cried Lucy, and both girls flung themselves upon him and covered him with kisses. "But what does it all mean?" asked Susan, when they were somewhat calmer. "It means," said Aslan, "that though the witch knew the deep magic, there is a magic deeper still which she did not know. Her knowledge goes back only to the dawn of time. But if she could have looked a little further back, into the stillness and the darkness before time dawned, she would have read there a different incantation. She would have known that when a willing victim who had committed no treachery was killed in a traitor's stead, the table would crack and death itself would start working backwards. And now—" "Oh, yes, now?" said Lucy, jumping up and clapping her hands. "Oh, children," said the lion, "I feel my strength coming back to me. Oh, children, catch me if you can." He stood for a second, his eyes very bright, his limbs quivering, lashing himself with his tail. Then he made a leap high over their heads and landed on the other side of the table. Laughing, though she didn't know why, Lucy scrambled over it to reach him. Aslan leaped again. A mad chase began. Round and round the hilltop he led them, now hopelessly out of their reach, now letting them almost catch his tail, now diving between them, now tossing them in the air with his huge and beautifully velveted paws and catching them again, and now stopping unexpectedly, so that all 3 of them rolled over together in a happy laughing heap of fur and arms and legs. It was such a romp as no one has ever seen except in Narnia. And whether it was more like playing with a thunderstorm or playing with a kitten, Lucy could never make up her mind. And the funny thing was that when all 3 finally lay together, panting in the sun, the girls no longer felt in the least tired or hungry or thirsty. "And now," said Aslan presently, "to business. I feel I am going to roar. You had better put your fingers in your ears." And they did. And Aslan stood up, and when he opened his mouth to roar, his face became so terrible that they did not dare to look at it. And they saw all the trees in front of him bend before the blast of his roaring, as grass bends in a meadow before the wind. Then he said, "We have a long journey to go. You must ride on me." And he crouched down, and the children climbed onto his warm, golden back, and Susan sat first, holding on tightly to his mane, and Lucy sat behind, holding on tightly to Susan. And with a great heave, he rose underneath them and then shot off, faster than any horse could go, downhill and into the thick of the forest. That ride was perhaps the most wonderful thing that happened to them in Narnia. Have you ever had a gallop on a horse? Think of that, and then take away the heavy noise of the hooves and the jingle of the bits, and imagine instead the almost noiseless padding of the great paws. Then imagine instead of the black or grey or chestnut back of the horse, the soft roughness of golden fur, and the mane flying back in the wind. And then imagine you are going about twice as fast as the fastest racehorse. And this is a mount that doesn't need to be guided and never grows tired. He rushes on and on, never missing his footing, never hesitating, threading his way with perfect skill between tree trunks, jumping over bush and briar and the smaller streams, wading the larger, swimming the largest of all. And you are riding not on a road, nor in a park, nor even on the downs, but right across Narnia, in spring, down solemn avenues of beech and across sunny glades of oak, through wild orchards of snow-white cherry trees, past roaring waterfalls and mossy rocks and echoing caverns, up windy slopes alight with gorse bushes, and across the shoulders of heathery mountains, and along giddy ridges, and down, down, down again into wild valleys, and out into acres of blue flowers. It was nearly midday when they found themselves looking down a steep hillside at a castle, a little toy castle it looked from where they stood, which seemed to be all pointed towers. But the lion was rushing down at such a speed that it grew larger every moment, and before they had time even to ask themselves what it was, they were already on a level with it. And now it no longer looked like a toy castle, but rose frowning in front of them. No face looked over the battlements, and the gates were fast shut. And Aslan, not at all slacking his pace, rushed straight as a bullet towards it. "The witch is home," he cried. "Now, children, hold tight." Next moment, the whole world seemed to turn upside down, and the children felt as if they had left their insides behind them, for the lion had gathered himself together for a greater leap than any he had yet made, and jumped, or you may call it flying rather than jumping, right over the castle wall. The two girls, breathless but unhurt, found themselves tumbling off his back in the middle of a wide stone courtyard full of statues. End of chapter 15. Oh my goodness me, that was very dramatic. They're in the witch's castle with all the statues, all the people and creatures that she's turned to stone. Oh my goodness, that's a bit scary. I'm so glad that I read 2 chapters, because the witches chapter before was really sad, and yes, we're moving on now towards the very, very end of the book, boys and girls. So next time I read, I'll do the last 2 chapters. I hope that you enjoyed that. Yeah, and it's Friday. Who's got that Friday feeling? It's a funny one, isn't it? I do have that Friday feeling. For me, I'm a little bit, I guess, I feel like, actually no, let's be honest. I thought I did, but I don't really. I'm okay, but I'm not my normal Friday feeling self, with everything that's been going on in the news. And yeah, there's just so much actually now, isn't there? And I think we really need to work at building a resilience, and really supporting each other in these times if we are feeling a little bit emotional or stressed. You know, whatever it is that you're feeling, it's okay, and I hope you work through it, and I hope you're supported. And I hope that, you know, story time is something that I've been doing to keep my sanity while I've been in lockdown. But, it's also for you guys to, there's so many different books that I've been doing, some factual stuff if that's the mood you're in, or things like The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. Sometimes we just want to go into a magical world and not think about our world for a little bit. So yeah, I hope that it's been of some benefit to people. Yeah, I just want to send some more love out, really. That's it. it's weird, isn't it? We're sort of coming through lockdown a little bit. Things are getting a bit more normal. Bojo said that we can hang out in groups of 6. So, you know, if you're into that, if you feel safe doing that, then it's great, isn't it? But then you can get thrown in the face with something else, like what's going on in America now. Yeah, it's just a crazy time, and I suppose it's always been crazy, but now we're going through something on a worldwide scale, as well as all the other stuff that has always been going on. That's the thing, like the stuff with the police in America, and, you know, racism in general. Obviously, it's always been going on. It's that added layer of like corona and the stress of that, and then that happening, it can be too much. And I don't know, just make sure that you're talking to people if you're upset or worried or anxious or whatever it is that you might be feeling. And if you're not, if you're okay right now, that's great. Good for you. And, you know, obviously the more of us that can look after ourselves and find some joy, that's going to help people that maybe are emotionally affected right now. So, yeah, that's why I just put on some glitter today, and I've got the wig back on, and, you know, Ted's all fancy. Yes, you know, we do our bit to spread the joy, don't we? Yeah, we just, you know, do what we can. Oh, you're going to take my eye out with that, Ted. Yeah, so I'm a big old mixture of all sorts, and you know, I've got people that I can reach out to, but I'm kind of reaching out to you guys too, even though it's just me talking. It's nice to share how we're feeling, and we have to do that. We have to I think we just need to talk about this stuff, especially like with the racism, you know, this ongoing awful, I think a virus is a great word for racism. Let's talk about it lots. Let's understand each other. Even if we think we don't really need to learn anything, maybe we will. I just started rewatching Dear White People on Netflix. I really recommend it. It's a great series. It's very funny and very enlightening, I think, for people. And I started watching that again today, following someone posting saying, you know, it's up to white people to, you know, do some work, get some understanding, get some education. And I think we can all do that, no matter what sort of level we think we're at with that. But yeah, I'm not preaching. It's just what I've been doing, and it's a great series, and I really recommend you check it out. It's Dear White People on Netflix. But that's just one example, isn't it? And obviously, like I say, talking to people. I don't know what else we can do. There's so much we can do. But yeah, that's what I've been doing today. Yeah, and just keeping that belief in the good of humanity, you know. I suppose if I'm thinking about racism as like a virus, then that doesn't stop us from being good, and we can overcome it. We can. It might feel impossible, but things are only impossible until they feel impossible before they're done. Lots of things feel impossible until they're done, and we can overcome it. I believe. I mean, humans get me down all the time, but actually overall I believe humans are good. I think we're born good. I think we're powered on love. Don't think we're powered on hate, really. It just gets in the way. And yeah, so I'm sending that intention out and that love out. All right. Happy Friday, everyone. I hope you're well, and if you're not well right now, I hope that you're okay and you get better soon. All right. Big love.